it's at this point that we start to think about, you know, what your look and feel is. It's at this point we start to think about what will cause people to follow you or buy from you or be a fan of you or promote you or whatever it is that you're looking for from your personal brand. So we've talked about the why, we've talked about the legacy and what you want to leave behind. We talked about the characters or the prototypes or the archetypes. We talked about connections for us personally to be relatable to. And in here, I wanted to spend some time really kind of thinking about, you know, what it is that makes you a unique brand. Now, we'll go more into this in the next module, but it's worth saying that people buy based on emotion. And whether you think that's true or not, it is true. People buy on emotion. Even if you are not a particularly emotional person, how you feel about a brand, whether you trust it or believe its claims, whether you, you know, have a feeling when you feel good being part of that brand or being, you know, connected to that brand. Maybe it's an author that or a musician that puts out a new book or album and you right away can't wait to get it. That is based on emotion. It's not just based on function. So how do personal brands that you love express themselves and connect with their fans or their audience? So personal image is very important. And I'm not saying that you can't change your personal image. I'm not saying that Marilyn Monroe had to wear the same kind of things for the rest of her career. Of course, if she had had a longer lasting career, she would have needed to change her branding, right? She would have got older, she would have started doing different kinds of movies, or she might have moved on to other kinds of things in her career. And so it's something that can be reinvented, but it is important when you're establishing a personal brand that you know what your personal image is and that your audience can connect with you in a way that they know, like, and trust you. So we're talking about here creating signature details of how you express yourself. So for me, for example, I love pink lipstick. That is something that you would pretty much always find, unless I did a Facebook Live without makeup, which happens. I don't worry about that too much. But when I'm working, I am typically in bright colors. I am typically in heels. I feel more strong and powerful. I would always have pink lipstick, and that's something that becomes what people expect from me. Now, they also expect that they're going to have fun. They also expect that they're going to have discussions and experiences, and they also expect that they're not just going to be lectured to or shown a ton of slides and no interaction. So those are things that are in how I express myself. I love high energy. I find that colors, either in my lipstick or in my clothing, I find that gives me lots of energy. And I find that when I'm wearing things like high heels, then I feel like I'm strong. Now, you don't have to wear makeup. You don't have to wear bright colors. You don't have to wear any particular kind of clothing. I mentioned to you, Brené Brown wears very casual clothing, and that's equally wonderful. What I would say is have a think about where you're most comfortable and what are your signature ways when you're expressing yourself that people would describe. How would people recognize you is probably a good way to explain it. So the next thing on this slide is talking about finding your personal brand tone of voice. So our tone of voice is something that very large corporations and brands would spend a huge amount of time and money getting right. That's how they communicate. That's how their audience knows their tone of voice. So for example, one brand who was a telecoms company very early on in mobile phones, their greeting was hello, because that's how we answered a phone before mobile phones. And then they spoke very conversationally, even in writing, always very conversational. Other brands have a different tone of voice. They might have a more formal tone of voice, or they might have an expression of more technology, or it depends on who you're trying to connect with. But your personal voice and tone of voice, your way of speaking to your audience, should be consistent, just as your look and feel should. So what's the most authentic way of you expressing yourself to your audience? That's one of the questions in your workbook, and I'd invite you to go and have a look at that and really spend a few moments thinking, what's the most authentic way for you to express yourself to your audience? So part of that is based on what makes you feel good. I would say most of that even is based on what makes you feel good and strong and expressive. And then have a think about what your audience needs. And we'll come back to that point in just a few minutes. So how does your audience experience the connections when they have connections with you? And how do you touch the lives of your audience members? So your personal image is really important. And I said we'd come back to the audience part of it as well. So your ideal audience will have an expectation of how you speak, how you look and feel. I'm not suggesting that you go in any way about changing your accent. My accent changes all the time because I'm a Canadian living in the UK and I travel all over, different expressions all over the place. But that's part of my branding, is that people come to recognize that whatever I'm saying is with energy and it's with sincerity. And, when you are thinking about your audience and what they would want, that's important. How can they recognize you? I've mentioned this before, but what is it that your audience is looking for in communication style? So learn as much as you can about your audience. Hang out where they hang out. Look at their comments if they're on social media or online somewhere, and keep engaging with them and just get a feel for the tone of voice. I went through a rebrand in my Attitudes Learning Development, my corporate training and coaching business, a couple of times actually, but there was one particular time I really wanted to feel more formal for some reason, and I tried. It just didn't connect. It didn't connect with me because it wasn't authentic, and it didn't connect with my audience. I work in a lot of technical environments, so I think I just wanted to sound more credible, but what it did is it wasn't more credible. I was using jargon and language that just was something that somebody technical might use, but it just wasn't landing because it wasn't authentic. And so it's important that you're thinking about your own style first, and then your audience, and then how do we connect? So when we want to connect, we always start from ourselves, start from where you're strong, and then we look at connecting with our audience. So what do I need? Or where am I starting from? Then where are you? Or where are you starting from? Or where are you at? And then what do I need to do to connect with you? So hanging out where your audience lives or where your audience hangs out and engaging with them is such a great way. If you are wanting to improve your personal branding in terms of your presentations at work, let's say, then have a look at how others are doing it. I'm not saying copy that, because in fact, I'm saying don't copy that. I'm saying find that balance between the way that you should communicate with your audience and the way that you are authentically designed to communicate. And then you can demonstrate how you relate to them. And that's not by an accent. That's not by specific clothes necessarily. That's not by, having a particular approach or cookie cutter kind of this is how I always do it. It's really demonstrating that you want to relate to them, and understanding yourself and understanding others and connecting is a great way to relate to them. So the other thing to pay attention to is how do you communicate non-verbally. So I use my hands a lot. I don't know if you can see that in this small picture on the screen, but I use my hands a lot. It helps me access the information in my brain. So it's a very functional way of being able to have a flow of communication, but it's also a way of expressing energy and holding space. And I need to do that because it helps me to feel confident, which helps me to express power, which helps me to be able to access vulnerability, which helps me to be able to connect with my audience. So that's one example of non-verbally. Obviously, how you appear, how you choose to appear is important as well. Those are all non-verbals. And I said to you before that if you engage your senses, then that's how you look, how it feels, taste, touch, smell, all of the senses. Something that I do non-verbally for me is I will always wear perfume. Now, most people are nowhere near close enough, especially these days, nobody's near enough to even notice that. But I know that, and I feel comfortable with that. And then have a think about things like, what's your vibe? What's your most authentic way of expressing yourself? So how do you connect with your audience? Mine is play, also vulnerability. What's your voice like? What words do you use? How do you stand out? How do others experience you and connect with you? And how do you touch their lives? And how do you want to touch their lives? And how do you share your experience to be able to do that, to be able to make a difference? So in order for you to get to the place where others will notice and connect and follow your personal brand, you need to know, again, going back to your legacy, your why. So spend some time answering these questions. Take some time to answer now. I will see you in the next module.